I was halfway through another failed job application when the doorbell rang, a long, sharp sound that cut through the quiet house. My parents were still at work, and we never got visitors at this hour. I walked to the door slowly, the weight of each step heavy against the wood floor. Through the peephole, I saw a woman, around middle age with a stiff grin that didn't reach her eyes. A young girl, maybe 15, stood behind her with her arms folded tight across her chest, eyes fixed on the ground like she wished to disappear. I didn't recognize either of them and stayed quiet. I pulled up the Ring camera on my phone. The woman waved at it like we were friends.
Hello there, neighbor. Lovely house you have. Been meaning to say that for a while.
Her voice was too cheerful, like she was trying to convince herself she belonged there.
This place looks even better than before it burned down. You know about that, right? A few years back? Owners still inside when it happened.
My stomach twisted. My parents had told me about the fire, but hearing it from her lips made the air feel thick. The woman tilted her head, her smile bending into something sharper.
Guess it could happen again. Houses like this, they always burn twice.
I stepped back, holding the phone tight. The girl finally looked up, her eyes wide with something close to panic. Mom, stop. Let's go. But the woman ignored her. She crouched, grabbed a potted plant from the porch, and yanked it hard enough to scatter dirt across the welcome mat.
Such pretty flowers. Mine now.
The girl's voice cracked. Mom, please, let's leave. The woman kicked the mat aside and walked off, pretending to smile, but clearly furious. When my parents got home, I showed them the Ring footage. My dad called the police immediately. The officers who arrived watched the video and traded looks I didn't like. They said they knew her, Carol Baker, a suspect in the fire that killed the previous owners, but never charged. They went to her house that night. It was empty. No car, no lights, no sign of her little girl. A week passed. One evening I came back from another long day of searching for work. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you notice every small sound. My parents were still out. The front door was open just enough to show a slice of dark hallway. A faint chemical smell drifted out, sharp and sour, like old gasoline left in the sun. I froze on the porch, heart beating fast enough to hurt. Inside, the living room looked still and ordinary, but a soft creak came from the back hallway. I stepped over the threshold, every floorboard under me groaning too loudly. Before I could call out, a figure shot from the side and slammed into me. I hit the floor hard, breath knocked out. A girl's voice whispered quick and frantic right next to my ear. I'm sorry. Please don't scream. I had to do it. She'll hurt me if I don't. It was the daughter. Her eyes were wide, face pale, trembling so violently she could barely stand. Suddenly, I started hearing footsteps behind me, and then a voice I knew.
You think you're smart, calling the police on me?
Carol stepped into the hallway holding a dented metal can that reeked of gasoline. Her grin was stretched too wide, her eyes locked on me with cold excitement.
You like this house so much, let's see if you can keep it.
She swung the can, splashing gasoline across the floor and onto my clothes. The chill of the liquid bit through the fabric, carrying the sharp burn of fumes that clawed at my throat. I tried to crawl toward the door, but she kicked me hard in the ribs, forcing me onto my back. She tossed a small box of matches to the girl.
Do it. Light it. Now.
The girl shook her head, voice breaking. I can't. Please don't make me. Carol's voice cut through the room.
Do it. Right now. Or I swear you'll wish you had.
Hands trembling, the girl scraped a match against the box. The small flame burst to life, glowing against her pale face. Outside, a distant wail grew louder. Police sirens slicing through the night. The girl gasped, and the lit match slipped from her fingers, landing on the soaked floor. It fizzled out before it touched the puddle. Carol screamed and lunged for the box, eyes wide. She struck another match, but before she could lower it, the front door crashed open with a thunder that shook the walls. Officers stormed in with weapons drawn. One grabbed Carol from behind. She thrashed and cursed, kicking at the floor, but they pinned her down fast. Gasoline fumes filled the air, stinging my eyes as I tried to stand. The girl collapsed into sobs as an officer guided her out of the house. Carol's voice turned into a shrill laugh that echoed against the wall, even as the handcuffs clicked shut. My parents arrived minutes later, their faces pale as the officers explained everything. They'd been patrolling nearby because of the earlier report and saw suspicious movement around the house. Carol Baker was arrested for attempted arson and assault. The daughter was taken into protective custody. We spent days cleaning, but the stench of gasoline clung to the floorboards and walls. Nights felt longer. Every creak of the house too loud. Every shadow in the hall too deep. We didn't move. My parents didn't have the money. I still check the Ring camera every night, waiting for another knock that never comes. And hopefully, it never will.
I left the club with my head still buzzing from the music and the drinks, stepping into streets that smelled of wet pavement and cigarettes while people spilled out of bars, laughing too loud and waving for taxis, as I pulled my jacket tighter and started the walk toward my apartment. My friends stayed behind, too deep into their own night to follow, but I wasn't worried, because I had walked this route plenty of times and the sidewalks were crowded with people heading home or toward the next drink, their voices mixing with the distant thud of bass. The glow from a corner store flickered ahead and gave me a small sense of routine as my shoes slapped the concrete in a steady rhythm, and I checked my phone only to see a handful of messages from friends still dancing inside, none of which I'd bothered to open. I was focused on the simple comfort of getting back to my own bed, thinking more about the quiet waiting for me than anything else, unaware of how fast everything was about to turn. Halfway down the block, I noticed two women standing near a parked car, not together, but locked in an argument that cut through the background noise with a sharp, jagged sound that forced me to slow down. Their bodies leaned forward in a way that wasn't playful or drunk-friendly. One jabbed a finger toward the other while the second woman shoved back hard enough to make her stumble, and their words, though blurred by distance, carried an edge that made people glance over and then quickly look away. It felt off, but not yet dangerous, like the start of a scene I had seen before outside bars when tempers flare for no reason, and I thought about crossing to the other side of the street, but instead decided to keep walking toward the house of my friend Evan, who lived only a few doors away. I planned to ring his bell and maybe sit for a few minutes, thinking the argument would burn out before I passed, but the shouting only grew louder, the sounds of anger pushing through the cool night air in a way that made my stomach tighten. I quickened my pace and reached his gate, trying to focus on the quiet porch ahead while the noise behind me snapped and cracked like dry wood breaking. I pressed Evan's doorbell and waited, listening for footsteps inside, but the house stayed dark and silent while the fight behind me grew sharper and more violent, every word carrying a weight that pulled me to turn around despite wanting to stay focused on the door. The two women were no longer just arguing, they were shoving each other hard, their movements jerky and desperate as if the alcohol in their systems had boiled into something meaner than a drunken misunderstanding. A small group of onlookers hovered near the curb, faces uneasy, yet no one stepped closer, and their hesitation only added to the heavy feeling creeping through my chest as I pressed the bell again and then started knocking with the side of my fist. The sound of a bottle breaking cracked across the street, and I flinched, the sudden silence that followed even worse than the noise had been, because it felt like the air itself was waiting for something I couldn't see, but could feel pressing in from every side. I wanted to call Evan, to shout his name, but the idea of my voice mixing with the violent sounds behind me froze my throat as I listened to the next few seconds stretch too long. The quiet snapped apart when a gunshot ripped through the block, louder than anything I had ever heard. A raw metallic crack that echoed against the buildings and made the bystanders scatter in every direction without a single scream. I turned just in time to see one of the women collapse onto the pavement as if her legs had disappeared, a dark pool spreading quickly beneath her under the yellow streetlight. The shooter, a young woman with wide eyes and trembling hands, stared down at the body like she couldn't believe what she had done, her chest rising and falling in frantic bursts while the gun hung loose but ready in her grip. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, slamming my fist against Evan's door until my knuckles hurt, but no lights turned on and no footsteps came. When I looked back, her gaze had locked onto me with a sudden sharp focus, and the street around us felt empty except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding against my ribs. She took a step toward me, her voice cracking as she spoke. "It was an accident. She's still alive. Help me." Her words shook as she moved closer, pleading while trying to hide the gun behind her back. But I could still see the dark metal against her sleeve, and the sight of it pulled every thought in my head into a tight knot of fear. She kept talking, saying we had to get the woman to a hospital, saying she didn't mean to fire, her face streaked with tears that didn't match the steady grip she had on the weapon. I pounded on the door again, my breath coming fast, but nothing inside the house stirred, and the street behind her was now completely empty, the few witnesses gone as if they had never existed. She reached out a hand, her voice breaking into a shout. "Please, I need you! Don't run!" I didn't answer. My legs moved before I even decided to run, carrying me along the side of the house toward the backyard gate, while her footsteps scraped hard against the concrete behind me. The sound of her shoes chasing me was too close, every step matching the panic that rattled in my chest, and I grabbed the wooden fence, dragging myself up with raw palms as a blast cracked the air and splinters burst from the plank near my hand. A sudden burn tore through my leg as a bullet grazed me, but I kept climbing, throwing myself over the top as the wood bit into my skin before dropping hard onto the grass below. I landed crooked and pain shot through my knee as I tried to stand, a deep bark exploding from the darkness as Evan's massive mastiff charged toward me, teeth bared and eyes locked on the fence. The dog stopped inches from me, growling low, then turned its focus to the woman trying to climb after me. Her face appeared above the boards for a second before the dog lunged and barked so loud it shook the night, making her flinch and slip back onto the pavement with a heavy thud. She cursed under her breath and fired another shot that punched through the fence, the wood raining splinters onto the grass while the dog barked even louder, its body tense and ready. She tried again to pull herself up, but her foot slid and she fell backward, landing hard enough to let out a sharp cry before kicking the boards in frustration. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing clearer with every passing second, and the sound finally made her hesitate. After a long moment of pacing and shouting words I couldn't make out, she turned and ran, her footsteps fading into the night while the dog's growl softened but never fully stopped. I collapsed against the fence, chest heaving, my phone slippery in my shaking hands as I called Evan. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with confusion as I told him I was in his backyard and bleeding. I heard the alarm in his voice as he said he was on his way and that he was calling an ambulance. The sirens outside grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the gaps in the fence as I pressed a hand against the wound in my leg, the pain finally catching up to the fear that had been carrying me. Minutes later, Evan rushed into the yard with his partner right behind him, both of them pale and wide-eyed as they helped me sit against the wall, while the dog finally settled beside us, still watching the gate with a low rumble in his chest. Police officers entered next, weapons drawn, scanning the yard before lowering them as paramedics knelt to check the graze on my leg and wrap it tight, while asking questions I could barely answer through the leftover adrenaline shaking my body. One officer said other units were searching the neighborhood and that witnesses had given them a clear description. By morning, the news was everywhere. They caught the woman only a few blocks away, the gun still in her hand and no real story for what she had done. The other woman died on the street before help could arrive, and detectives told me the shooter claimed it was an accident but gave shifting details that made no sense. They think she tried to chase me down to silence me before the police arrived. To be honest, she almost did.
As a successful lawyer, I have to deal with a lot of people every day. Some are nice folks and some come from the wrong side of the town. But as a lawyer whose duty is to save her client, I have to handle all their people every day. However, a few years back, winning a case backfired on my personal life and left me terrorized for months. As a divorce lawyer, each day I see several marriages coming to an end. It's really hurtful to see both the parties, and sometimes even the kids, being dragged through the tedious process of divorce. But in a few cases, I feel proud of being a divorce lawyer. Miranda Smith's case was one of those. Miranda was a God-fearing, church-going young woman from East Texas. When she was 22, her parents pressured her into marrying Rob, who wanted to marry Miranda for a couple of years. Miranda was naive and thought life with Rob would be a bed of roses. Instead, Rob started abusing her, laying his hand on her. He did not even stop when she was pregnant and abused her in front of their kid too. Finally, after 8 years of marriage and a child, Miranda dared to file for divorce. I was representing her in the court as her lawyer, and even though Rob was at fault, he fought tooth and nail with Miranda for their daughter's custody and to prove in court that Miranda was cheating on him. However, Rob did not know that I am an amazing lawyer. And not only did Miranda get her daughter's full custody, she also got a huge alimony payment and a hefty check for child support every month. Unlike some of the other women I had represented who were out to defame and rob their ex-husbands, Miranda deserved every penny for the life she had endured with Rob. She was a free woman now. Soon after this trial, I moved into a new house I had recently purchased. Back then, I wasn't married and lived alone in that house. But as a woman who dealt with crime all the time, I never told any of my clients about my personal life. So very few people from my personal life knew about this move. But since I moved into the house, weird things started happening. I always felt like someone was keeping an eye on me, but I could never put a finger on it. Being around criminals gives you a sixth sense. I always double-locked my home and made sure windows were always closed and locked. I even installed a CCTV camera and a doorbell camera to keep an eye on all the activities, but it never captured anything. I could not even go to the cops because I had no evidence. It was just a hunch. Until I received a letter at my doorstep one evening after returning from work. "You destroyed my life, and now I will destroy yours too?" That's all the letter said. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and I could not guess who would be out to destroy my life. But still, being a single woman, living all alone, also, I was scared. The next day, I showed the letter to one of my superiors, and he said there was nothing we could do, as it could also be a prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. A couple of days later, there was another note left on my doorstep. This note, however, made the hair on my neck stand. "I'm watching your every step. I know exactly what you do. You have been warned." I was so freaked that I got into my home, locked the door, and immediately called the cops. The cops arrived and checked my house and the surrounding areas. They found nothing. No footprints, tire tracks, nothing. They asked me to stay put and call back at the slightest hint of threat. Some more days passed without any events until I received another letter. "I will first take care of you and then go after her, so this time there will be no one to save her." Now, I had no clue who this note was talking about, but I was scared, and I knew the life of one of my clients was in danger. I called my superior and sent a picture of the note to him. He asked me to call the cops and that he would take care of the rest. I called the cops again, and this time was no different. Other than the letter, they found nothing. I was so disappointed and scared that I kept looking over my shoulders for the next few weeks, but nothing happened other than the sinking feeling of someone watching me. Weeks later, I returned home from a party where I had a couple of drinks. I was slightly buzzed, but not totally drunk. I walked into my house and locked the door behind me out of habit, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on my sofa to watch TV. I did not know when I fell asleep, but I woke up with a ping from my phone. The doorbell camera had sent me an alert, meaning someone was at my door at 3 a.m. I was instantly on alert and aware of the fact that I was all alone. I knew I had to act quickly and act smart. I ran around the house checking if all the windows were locked. When I was sure that everything was closed, I opened the doorbell's camera app and saw the most disturbing sight on it. I could see a huge, fat man in front of my door. I instantly recognized that face and those damn 1970s glasses. It was none other than Rob. He was staring into my doorbell cam and pressing the talk button. He said,
"Stephen here."
Even though I knew it was Rob. I instantly replied, "You got the wrong house." I tried to be brave, even though I was panicking internally. I picked up the landline and dialed 911. Rob laughed.
I knew this was a rip-off.
He had a creepy smile on his face. I decided to play it cool until the cops arrived and said, "What are you looking for, Stephen?"
No, I'm Stephen.
When he couldn't answer my question right, I knew he was intoxicated.
I'm looking for a Fifi.
He said, and I knew he wasn't looking for any Fifi. He was here for me. The operator told me that the cops were on the way and not to open my door under any circumstances, and to stay put, if possible, to grab anything to be used as a weapon. I grabbed the nearby glass flower vase in one hand and had the phone with the doorbell cam's live footage in the other. I was standing by the sofa, terrified. "Yeah, you got the wrong house," I said once again, thinking that he would go. But instead, he said,
So, you don't want to have sex tonight?
I was shocked and hoping for the cops to get here soon. The operator was still on the line with me and she heard everything. I was so baffled, and the thought of Rob forcing himself on me occupied my head. On the other end, I heard the operator asking me to say that my husband was in the house with me and he had a gun. Sir, my husband is in the living room with a gun," I said, trying very hard to keep my voice from cracking.
Okay, understood,
Rob said, and just like that, he turned around and left. That's when I heard the sirens in the distance, and I just collapsed on the floor. A couple minutes later, the cops were at the door, and I opened it with tears streaming down my cheeks. Some of them were in the house talking to me, and others were checking the surroundings. I was so terrified that I stayed up all night. The next day, I got a call from the sheriff's office that they had Rob in custody and asked if I wanted to press charges. And I knew if I let him go, he would come back to hurt me or worse, Miranda and her daughter. He was convicted of abuse, child abuse, blackmail, and threatening and attempted murder. Some more charges related to illegal drug possession and drug peddling were involved too. The fat old man was put behind bars for 67 years, and I could not be happier. Thankfully, when Rob was stalking and blackmailing me, Miranda and her daughter were in Europe, so he could not reach them. But I still have the footage for my doorbell cam, and whenever I see it, I still get chills, wondering what could have happened.